So, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Boa tarde a todos. It's a great pleasure to have all of you take part at this virtual panel, Canada at the forefront of sustainable mining. My name is Franz Brandenberger. I am a trade commissioner at the Canadian Trade Office in Belo Horizonte, and I am in charge of the mining sector in Brazil. This panel will be translated into English. If you need translation, please click on the interpretation button in the bottom of your screen. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our Consul General, Mr. David Rbc, to welcome all of you today. Mr. Rbc, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Good afternoon, bonjour, boa tarde a todos. As Franz said, my name is David Rbc. I'm the Canadian Consul General here in Rio de Janeiro, with some responsibilities for several states in Brazil, which includes Minas Gerais, the home of the mining industry for this country, which explains why I'm here with you today. And it's with great pleasure that I get to welcome you to this event on the margins of Exposi Bram that highlights Canada's engagement towards sustainable mining, including the promotion of responsible business conduct in Canada and abroad, and the development of clean tech for mining and extractive companies, among others. While I'm extremely disappointed that we're doing this over Zoom and we're not all together in Belo Horizonte, it's still an honor for me to be here today with all of you to bring to the forefront the crucial subject of There we go. I've just unmuted somebody muted me. Hopefully we'll all be together in Belo next year as we celebrate this. While we continue to be unable to meet in person, we are grateful that we have been able to gather participants from across our countries to participate today. I would like to thank our implementing partner, the Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Canadá, and the Office of the Government of Quebec, as well as all of the distinguished speakers that we're going to have today, who will be presenting in our panels. Este ano estamos comemorando 80 anos de relações diplomáticas entre o Brasil e o Canadá. E a mineração é uma das áreas em que temos uma sólida e duradoura relação. O setor mineral é setor de excelência para o Canadá, que tem cooperado regularmente com os principais atores brasileiros visando uma mineração mais responsável, eficiente e sustentável. Neste sentido, gostaria de parabenizar o IBRAM, que desde a assinatura em 2019 de um acordo de cooperação com a Associação de Mineração do Canadá, tem trabalhado arduamente para implementar no setor mineral brasileiro os princípios de sustentabilidade elaborados por esta associação canadense. And to our friend Ben Chalmers at the Mining Association of Canada, it's great to see you online today. As part of our progressive and inclusive trade agenda, Canada is fully dedicated to achieving gender parity to ensure that everyone in society reaps the benefits. As a government, we also promote a balanced approach to responsible business conduct known as RBC. RBC is about preventing harm, protecting human rights and the environment, and integrating the management of risks to the environment, people, and society throughout business operations, including the supply chains. We work with Canadian companies, civil society organizations, foreign governments, and communities, as well as other stakeholders to foster and promote responsible business conduct, sustainable economic growth, and shared values. And so for this, I'm thrilled that our first panel will include the Mining Association of Canada, who will speak about the association's approaches to sustainable mining, and Ulula, an innovative Canadian social enterprise that equips organizations with technology, data, and analytics to monitor risks of human rights abuses in order to create more responsible supply chains. Our first panel will also include the Canadian consulting firm IND 101 in collaboration with Brazilian mining company Conheça to speak about supplier diversity programs that mining companies can adopt as another great avenue to include more women in the industry. And Jamil, it's a pleasure to see you here as well today. Nice to have you with us. Amanhã, dia 7 de outubro, durante a Expo Ibram, teremos a apresentação do primeiro relatório do Plano de Ação para as Mulheres na Mineração, criado para aumentar a participação feminina na mineração no Brasil. Este plano de ação é uma adaptação da guia canadense resultante de uma parceria entre o Instituto Brasileiro de Mineração, Women in Mining Brazil, IND 101 e o governo do Canadá. Tomará que todos possam participar deste painel. The second panel will showcase Canadian expertise on clean tech in the mining sector that can provide innovative solutions to Brazilian mining companies. I'm pleased to say that we have 11 Canadian companies with clean tech solutions participating this week in a virtual mission, and they are all with us here today. Aux entreprises canadiennes participants, je vous souhaite une mission très fructueuse. Estas soluções têm como objetivo reduzir os impactos ambientais, aumentar a segurança das barragens, fazer uso mais racional da água, reduzir a suspensão de particulados no ar e melhorar como todo a eficiência operacional das empresas de exploração mineral, reduzindo seus custos operacionais ao mesmo tempo. Canadian companies will be meeting with mining exploration companies operating in Brazil during the matchmaking sessions tomorrow and Friday, organized by our trade commissioners. And if you're interested to know more about the Canadian companies and their amazing solutions, please contact our trade commissioners for mining and clean tech, Franz Brandenberger, who introduced me today, and Monica McDonald, who I believe is speaking a little bit later on. Desejo uma excelente participação no evento Canada at the Forefront of Sustainable Mining, que seja evento produtivo e de muitas oportunidades e aprendizado para todos. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, David, for that excellent introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Boa tarde, bom après-midi. Grande prazer para mim estar aqui com vocês hoje e moderar esse primeiro painel. Meu nome é Michelle Meor-Sarrazin e sou a recém-chegada vice-cônsul e gerente de negócios encarregada do setor de conduta empresarial responsável do Consulado-Geral do Canadá, no Rio de Janeiro. So it's a great pleasure to have you all here today for our first panel. This conversation on responsible business conduct will feature lightning talks on diversity, innovation, and sustainability. We're honored to have with us today Canadian and Brazilian industry leaders that will present inventive policies, strategies, and technologies in support of a more sustainable and just global mining sector. Our panelists will each have 5 minutes to explain the importance of their own topic to the audience, and afterwards we'll have a 30-minute or so, depending on the length of presentations, moderated discussion, and the audience will be invited to submit some questions using the chat function. Dans le message à nos participants francophones, quoique les présentations d'aujourd'hui se tiendront en anglais et en portugais, n'hésitez pas de soumettre des questions en français et je pourrai les traduire pour nos panélistes. O governo do Canadá é defensor de longa data da conduta empresarial responsável e esperamos que as empresas canadenses ativas no exterior sigam todas as leis relevantes, respeitem os direitos humanos em suas operações e adotem as melhores práticas voluntárias e diretrizes internacionalmente respeitadas, como os princípios orientadores sobre empresas e direitos humanos da ONU e as diretrizes da OCDE para empresas multinacionais. As our Consul General just mentioned, responsible business conduct is about integrating the management of risks to the environment, to the people and society within the core of all business activities. In addition to providing support and guidance, RBC also presents an opportunity for companies to increase their brand value, to acquire and retain talent, to reduce costs, and to innovate. First published in 2009 and updated in 2014, Global Affairs Canada's Rbc Strategy, titled Doing Business the Canadian Way, which you can find online, presents our ever-evolving approach to RBC. A new strategy is currently under development and will be released shortly. And while the previous strategies that we've had focus on the extractive sector, this new strategy will also apply to all sectors and focus on RBC behaviors. Agora é meu grande prazer poder apresentar nossos ilustres painelistas. Ben Chalmers, who's been mentioned, is the Senior Vice President of the Mining Association of Canada. Since joining MAC in 2011, he's been responsible for the Towards Sustainable Mining, or TSM, initiative. MAC's award-winning program focused on enabling mining companies to meet society's needs for minerals, metals, and energy products in the most socially, economically, and environmentally responsible way. Over the last few years, he has played an important role in the international growth of TSM as it becomes a sought-after responsible mining standard. Jamie Cruz is the founder and CEO of IND 101, a consulting firm specialized in inclusion and diversity diagnostics, strategy development, and implementation. Jamie is a recipient of the 2021 Business Changemakers Awards by the Globe and Mail and the 2020 Canadian Institute of Mining Distinguished Lecturers in recognition of her work developing inclusive workplaces, especially in mining. She's the founding director of Women in Mining Brazil and is a board director of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Jamie. Victoria Calvi is the direct and indirect OPEX coordinator at Nexa Supply Chain Department and is also the leader of the women's group at Nexa Resources. Her career started in supply chain at Nexa, a global mining company based in Brazil and Peru, working with different categories such as raw materials, MRO, services, and CapEx. In her role as leader of the women's group, she has established Nexa's action plan with the objective of having 20% of its labor force be women by 2025. Victoria is a graduate in chemical engineering from the University of Sao Paulo. She also holds an executive MBA from the Inspire Institution and a postgraduate degree in logistics and supply chain management from MIT. And Antoine Neuty, who is the founder and CEO of Ulula, an award-winning B Corp certified enterprise based in Toronto, Canada. Ulula enables companies to engage communities and other stakeholders in real time through mobile phones, which monitor and manage their social license. Ulula's products are used in 35 countries and have reached over 1.5 million people. Antoine previously held senior positions at the International Natural Resource Governance Institute and the United Nations Development Program. He is the author of various publications on transparency, mobile technology, natural resource governance, and supply chains. So with that, I'll hand over to our first presenter, Ben. Mr. Chalmers, over to you.
Hello, and really want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk. 5 minutes is not a lot of time, so I'll get straight into it. But first, I'd really just like to acknowledge David and Franz and Michelle and the rest of the team with the Canadian Trade Commissioners. They do such a wonderful job in supporting Canadian business abroad, but also increasingly supporting leadership in responsible business conduct, which has played a huge role in the way that we've helped to grow TSM. Their participation in bringing Ibrahim and Mac together around this was instrumental. TSM is a program that we started over 15 years ago in 2004. It's the first of its kind standard that focuses on mine site level reporting of key environmental, social indicators. One of the most important things about it is that it is overseen by a network of national multi-stakeholder panels. So it's not just multi-stakeholder governed, as many standards today are, but the distinction it has is that it relies on that local national level engagement between the industry and stakeholders and rights holders to make sure that it's implemented appropriately in each country that it's adopted in. When we worked with Ibrahim to adopt TSM, Brazil was the second largest mining country in the world to adopt it, and it really made a big step forward for the program. Ibrahim was later joined more recently by the Minerals Council of Australia. So, one of the things that I think is really carrying TSM forward is this partnership now that we have between three of the largest mining countries in the world. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is that, well, this is a Canadian originated standard, and you can see some of the areas that it addresses on the top left corner of the screen there. It continues to grow internationally, not just in terms of adoption, but also in content. And one of the things that we're working on actively right now is adding an important new protocol to the standard, focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this is really exemplifying the culture that we're trying to build around advancing responsible business conduct in mining, and that this really is starting off as a collaboration between mining industries in Canada and Brazil, because we've got Jamil on here, who has been leading the way in this area with women in mining in Brazil. And Jamil was able to share some of their early work on this issue to help us form the basis of what will become a TSM EDI approach. So that's very exciting. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit just as Abraham was starting to build some momentum around this. So a few things like this multi-stakeholder community of interest panel I spoke about, was interrupted, but we're very much looking forward to picking up with all the momentum that we can bring to work with Abraham to help advance this standard through implementation, as we start to see some sort of move back to normal conditions. There's a number of other things that are happening here that are very exciting too. I mean, on next week during the London Metal Exchange week in London, TSM is going to be announced as one of the initial standards included in the LME passport, which is a digital passport aimed at making sure that the sustainability credentials can flow through the supply chain. So we're really honored to be part of that, and I think it will increase the amount of value that miners get for their efforts in TSM. We're also yesterday, Responsible Steel, another standard that we've been working with, put out a consultation draft of standards that they're recognizing to access the responsible steel supply chain, and TSM is one of the first 3 standards to be included in that. And I know that's particularly significant for Brazil because of the strong focus on steel components with iron ore, for example. So this is all part of our effort, not just to build a solid, credible standard, but to build one that is at the center of consolidation of standards and at the center of providing value, both in terms of site level performance on environmental, social issues, but also in the supply chain and with investors. And I want to make one more acknowledgement before I run out of my 5 minutes, and that is to one of my colleagues on the panel here, Nexa. Nexa was instrumental in helping to bring about this collaboration between MAC and Abraham around TSM. It's important when we start these partnerships that we have Canadian companies that are supportive of TSM adoption where they operate, but to have a local champion, to have a Brazilian-based champion get behind TSM in the early stages and help pave the way for Abraham to adopt TSM was really wonderful. So just wanted to make that acknowledgement too. And I'll stop there. I'll keep it to my 5 minutes and look forward to answering whatever questions come my way.
I think it's my turn. I wasn't sure if Michelle was going to come back. Perfect. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Bonjour, boa tarde. My name is Jamile Cruz. I'll be speaking English today, but Portuguese is my native language. I'm a proud Brazilian Canadian, but speaking to you today from Montreal in Quebec, Canada, because again, we decided to go for the 5 minutes lightning talk. I'm gonna jump right in. But first, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you. Consulate, the government of Canada, and CCBC have been great sponsors of all this work, and we believe on the cooperation and international approach that Canada has taken to really support responsible business conduct across the globe. So thank you for the invitation for making this space. I'm the founder of IND 101. As Michelle already presented, we really believe on the power of inclusion, and inclusion, as Ben did so masterfully before here on his explanation, when we get private sector, the actual industry to work with industry associations, government, and the support of the community through affinity groups, through movements like Women in Mining, we see the power of change. So that's what we're here for, and we're really excited to see the TSM protocol around equity, inclusion, diversity being put together. I think this is going to be a game changer for all of us in the industry. One thing that I always say around diversity, equity, and inclusion, independent of the sector that we're looking at, is that we need to stop looking at it as that extra volunteer time that we're demanding someone on HR to do some work so we can understand how we can recruit more people from a specific group. Equity, inclusion, and diversity, I think we're getting to that understanding and maturity today where we understand that there's legislation to be followed through. We understand that it's a cultural change, and that change needs to be managed within our organizations, that the use of technology, future technology, current technology can be tools that essentially exclude or include people. So we should be quite aware and design our technology around the inclusion of people. We need to focus on the business outcomes and not just the bottom line outcomes, but overall business performance and how it actually impacts our business, because that will help us activate our leaders, bring the leadership together, and also understand the impact that we have in the market, right? Ben gave a great example of how Nexa supported all this work that TSM is doing in Brazil and the connection between the associations and the countries. That's what we're talking about. So it's not just about the vision of your company and how you're being projected to the outside world so you can attract the best talent, but also how the impact on communities and societies actually helps you, clients, and everything else. What can we learn from what we've done in the past? And that's something that I always hit on. We've learned that for a big cultural change, as we had with safety and quality, 30 years ago, it was not what we see today, right? Today, we track every single result on a daily basis. We do stand-up calls and start our meetings with safety shares. We look into everything that we do from a safety lenses. If you go into any mining company website or supplier, you're going to see that safety or no harm, it's kind of the standing pillar that everybody obeys. So when you think about the changes that we need to see from a cultural perspective in inclusion, diversity, and equity, that's where we need to start looking at. We're going to require certification, we're going to require investment, we're going to require so many things to be put in place for us to be able to achieve the results we're talking about. So for the companies that are here with us today, think about this, think about business priority and the concept around business priority, how we implement other business priorities in the past. Did we have specific investments? Did we have executive leaders that sponsored it? Did we have a specific budget to develop? And I think through the examples we're going to give here today, you're going to see we're still on that moment where commitment is talked about, but the action piece and the results that you're going to see tomorrow on the first progress report that we're going to be presenting of the action plan from Women in Mining Brazil, you're going to see a little bit of that, how companies are still developing the concepts around action. So talking about the action plan, this was also a cooperation between Canada and Brazil. And we started as basis with the action plan from Women in Mining Canada, which was a project put together with the support of the Canadian government, and in similar, when we brought to Brazil with the support of Ibram, we developed this plan. We used to say we're like making it tropical. So understanding the current situation, understanding the challenge faced in the Brazilian mining industry, and really developing strategies that could move the group forward. You see there the barcode, so you can download the guide at any day or go to winbrazil.org and download that information. But that essentially it's a framework that companies can use to understand what needs to be done, where to start, what are the steps that you need to take to make a change. One of the things we did with this exercise was to put a call to action. So we wanted to see the industry changing together with the establishment of this movement called Women in Mining Brazil. So we put that request there. People really engaged, and Ibram really supported us doing this. So we started with 2 companies, which was Nexa and Largo, when we did the launch at PDAC in 2020. Today, we have 25 companies who signed this call to action to actually implement the action plan and monitor on a yearly basis the results. one of the things we want to talk to you today, because the government of Canada are really supportive of the concepts around supply and diversity and how that can really impact not just industry, but the societies we live in. It's around really addressing and understanding where the money that the organizations are spending is going to. So when we think about Strategy 6 on the action plan, supplier diversity, the business case is solid, right? There are reports from IFC, from the bank, there are reports from all places that you can search. Canadian government has a lot of reports establishing this. But one of the numbers I always like to touch on is the fact that when women receive those dollars, 90 cents of every dollar of above the necessity of income, so after paying the baseline, goes into education, health, nutrition, which we call kind of like the human resources perspective, where men usually spends 30 to 40% of that additional money into human resources. That makes a huge impact on communities and societies. So that's why we're so keen on a feminist approach and an investment that essentially puts money into the women on the communities. And then financial impact, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but we know that there is a lot of steps there around job creation and innovation, right? Like for those who haven't heard about the Artemis project, I invite you to go and research the artemisproject.ca, I think. It has so many companies led by women doing innovation in mining that it's actually quite exciting to see. So how do you go about this? You start on this is what you're going to see on the action plan. Assess and prepare, look at your numbers, look at where you're spending which are the companies where you spend money with, how are they designed, are you requiring that they follow the same diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies that you're doing for your own corporation. Activate, look at the steps that you can take, kind of what's the next thing we can do to create equality of opportunities for all these corporations that are present on our communities and in society. And then monitor and sustain. So what is the return on investment? What we can do to continue this growth? How are we measuring the progress so we actually understand where the money needs to go? And then with this concept, I'm super happy to bring Victoria here because she can show how Nexa essentially took the action plan and really showed us how it's possible to do this change.
Thank you very much, Jamil, and congratulations for all your achievements. Well, it's an honor to be here, not only to be participating in this forum, but also to represent Nexa on its case. So getting to it, Nexa Resources is a global mining company based both in Brazil and Peru. We also have offices in Houston and Luxembourg, and we mostly produce zinc and copper. So Nexa has been creating a plurality transformation culture, and this is a case that I'm going to show to you. Perfect. Thank you, Jamil. The first thing, as Jamil explained, was the commitment that we did with Women in Mining. There was to sign the commitment that we would implement the gender equality in our company. And according to this commitment, one of the first things that we did was to create the groups of plurality. So we're looking at all the diversity groups that we should establish a different side of view, and we should develop this thing in our company. So as we decided to be a membership, also not only Women in Mining Brazil, but also Peru, as we are on the Peru side as well. We also have our CR Peru as an ambassador of the He for She movement. So all of these commitments came to the next question was, what is our action plan? So we developed the same action plan from Women in Mining Brazil to us. And one of the pillars was suppliers diversity. So why is that? And why should we put so much effort on this thing? At Nexa, we have around 20,000 workers in our production units. And 57% of these workers that are on the production units work through our suppliers. So they are hired through our suppliers. If we want to really change our culture and begin to have a more plural culture, how can we do this alone? If we have more than half of the people working through our suppliers, we need to engage our suppliers on this journey. So this was the first step the first goal that we did, and we understood this a little bit better so we can establish our strategy on the following steps. And the first thing was, how can we get to know our suppliers? Through a supplier survey. Let's ask them, what are they doing? So what we established was a little bit more than 100 suppliers. which represent 43% of Nexa spend. So it's important to look at all the suppliers bases that you have and put a lot more effort on these suppliers that can actually make a difference, not only on spend, but on how many workers do they have on our production units. So we have this 104 suppliers representing 80% of the third parties in our units. So we asked them many questions about every kind of the plurality groups. But what we most found out is that 80% of these companies understand the importance of the plurality to their companies. So they understand that plurality and diversity can actually bring different results in a change of culture that can establish a new way to do things. But only 31% have developed effective actions on the theme and have pleased a commitment to the theme. So this is the point. We found out that here, this is where Nexa can help their supplier bases. So we created the plural chain, which we are very excited to show it to you, because it was just the beginning, but it's a movement. Plural chain, it's a movement that promotes intensively the plurality in our supply chain with our suppliers. It was an event this year. It was in February of this year, and you can go online on YouTube and just type plural chain. You can find it very easily if you're interested on see it. But we invited more of this 100 plus suppliers to participate on an award that they should give us the best ideas that they had to implement these ideas of trying to achieve this more plural culture in their agreements with Nexa. So they already have these agreements. Why shouldn't we see it in a different way to bring the diversity on our day-to-day units, right? So we put an award as innovation, impact, and replicability was to put more effort on the suppliers and show what cases, the best cases that we had on this business. And here are some pictures for you. So we had more than 2,000 views. We had a very strong engagement from the market as well. We did all this award ceremony. So I'm going to show you a little bit more of the results that we had. We had a very high percentage of favorability on our internal surveys. So they really believe that plural chain helped to bring Nexa closer to the people, which is our main strategy and goal. We had a very strong industry engagement through many magazines, also social media, mostly LinkedIn. But looking on a Nexa way, a plural chain was just one movement. Nexa is working a lot also on the gender equality, and I bring some numbers to you so you can see the results starting to show up. When we look at Aripuanã, which is a new mining unit that we're establishing, it's going to start next year. We have a very aggressive target to get a women's participation of 40% in this year and 50% of next year, right? So this is very aggressive, and we're getting to it. And we also have a stronger leadership commitment in 2021, which we're also very proud to say that all the C-level and the Nexus employees have the target of percentage of women in the company. We started the year with 14.2%, and we are on the road to get to 60% at the end of the year, almost 2% in 1 year. So all this so we can establish this target and we can achieve the target of 20% in 2025. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope you had a blast here with the Nexus case.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and I'll now hand off to Antoine.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay? This is Antoine. If you can pull up the slides. And what do you want me to share my screen?
The slides should be coming up, I believe.
Okay, up to you. While they are coming, first let me thank Michelle and all the organizers for the opportunity to speak and share the experience of Lula in the mining sector in Brazil, and really try to also build the bridges with what the other amazing work that the other panelists have described so far. I mean, if you want, I'll just share my screen if it's okay with you. I can do that as well. Is that fine?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen, Osman. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So the idea of Lula is quite simple and intuitive. The idea is, as we've heard today, it's very important to listen to the women that you affect, the workers, the communities that where mining operates, in order to really get shared value between what the company does and its impact on society. And really, it's at the core of what I started about 8 years ago when I launched Lula, building on my experience in the field. So the technology we built is predicated on the idea that because mobile phones are really ubiquitous, you can connect with people, whether they have a simple mobile phone like that, that's the old Nokia phones from the 2000, or a very fancy phone, in any language, whether you're illiterate or whether you have the latest gadget, and be able to do that in an anonymous manner, free of charge, and at scale. So, and the way we realize that is we use chatbots. So think about the way you interact with your telecom operator or your bank. You have a customer service. We've adapted these types of tools so that we can really facilitate the engagement with stakeholders. And we've been doing that in the mining sector with large companies like Anglo American, Barrick, or MMG. But we work across a number of supply chains, and I think the case of Nexa, I think, shows how important supply chains are in order to really leverage the impact that mining companies have on the overall economy. The way it works, as I said, it's quite intuitive. It's two-phase. So if you're a worker or a person in the community, you may interact with the Lula application through this phone, or if you're using the app, that's also an opportunity. And you really engage with some companies will do that with workers, because that's where the impacts are most important and most material. And with others, it's going to be, and a lot of that is the case in the mining, we will work with communities to understand what are the impact on environmental, social variables, how much trust there is in the company's actions, how much responsiveness, and really to get the pulse of how this relationship is going, so that you can address any risks as they arise, and really try to prevent any problem from happening, or measure how effective your actions have been. And the measurement of that, gets into what you have on the right side here, where all this data is pulled, whether you're responding in Brazilian, in an indigenous dialect, or any other language that we have set up for. And it's not just about data; it's also about communication. So we have a module that also enables whistleblowing or grievance, so that you can also identify specific problems and provide specific remedies, and do that in a very accessible manner. The idea is not just that you have a box that you have to travel to, or to write a letter, which are really difficult to do for a lot of people in the community, but to really make it super easy for them to make their voices heard, so that then you can address that. And I think the experiences of that we've had, and we've heard today about how important women are in the mining communities to get to better development outcomes. It's really echoes what we see as well, where by giving an equal chance for everyone to speak up and to get their voices heard, you also get to better outcomes in your engagement with suppliers or in your engagement with the community. In my 5 minutes, I just want to share one concrete example of how that works in one specific case. We've been working for the past nearly 4 years with Anglo American in about 15 mines, including some of the assets in Brazil, where every month you have about 1,500 people that are answering about 5 questions on environmental, social, and other social license variables through WhatsApp, SMS, or voice. Because again, we want to be really inclusive, and that gives a pulse of how things are going on a more continuous basis, and that's used by a number of people in the field, as well as in the corporate divisions, so that they can assess whether there is a latent risk that they're not seeing because they have been blind to something that may have happened in the community, or if they've just heard some of the loudest voices, but not those that may actually be having very serious problems. It's also used at a more aggregate level to really measure the overall performance of the company, and I think there's been a lot of interesting innovations by Anglo American on that. It's also been used in, I think there's a lot of relevance to what we do in the COVID era, because a lot of you, I suspect, on this webinar may have been hampered in your efforts to reach out to workers or to communities. And clearly, with the digital tools that we have, you can continue doing that. And sometimes we've seen recent clients use that for environmental social impact assessments in order to really get a modification of the permits, so that really you can continue really engaging and really getting the social dialogue that's critical to achieving compliance and implementing standards, and best practices in stakeholder engagement. So to summarize, I think the value of what Ulula provides to the mining sector and has been doing with a number of its clients is that, first, we help prevent operational disruption and really promote business continuity, which is obviously a big business case, as any disruption is highly costly for companies. We've seen a number of efficiencies and critical ones, around engaging during key required processes on the SIA and other such processes that have helped companies measure the perceptions and avoid, I think, certain penalties. And on the upside, I think we also see interesting uses of the tool, so to measure how you're doing on job creation, also to disseminate, your jobs and the opportunities that the companies provide to the communities in a more transparent and inclusive manner. And that, again, it obviously participates to the creation of better outcomes for the companies and the societies where it works. And I'll leave it at that. And looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Antoine. You just stopped sharing your screen. Great, thanks.
Exactly.
No worries at all. So I see there's already a question in the chat, which is, and I was going to ask our panelists, maybe if you can think of some questions for your co-panelists, but we'll go straight to the audience. So this is for Victoria, if you'd like to take it on. Sorry about that. Asking, so what were the challenges you found in finding adequate professionals in the market to meet gender quotas? And is it possible that quota observance and equal pay may result in sacrificing productivity and profitability in the sector?
Well, Michelle, I believe everything is a balance. So we're not here to establish the gender equality in the first thing that we're going to see. It has to come along with the business. So the main challenges that we found out are suppliers that are not exactly on the same rhythm that we are. So they don't really understand how can they do it. They understand the importance, as I mentioned. So what I believe that we helped was to try to change some ideas. So I changed some ideas. We can see that suppliers that can help each other as well. So for example, they can establish when they're making an agreement with us, think about different, who are they going to hire to work with next? So why not 50% of women, for example, right? So this challenges, I believe it's going to follow us a little bit more, because everything that demands a transformational culture also takes time. But what I believe is that we have to create a committee on diversity side that we should always bring with us in every business conversation that we have. So diversity can also be included with the business and the profits that we're looking for.
Thanks very much, Victoria. And I see Jamile might want to speak, and I'll also maybe ask if Ben can chime in on this, as MAC is already working on including diversity, equity, diversity, and inclusion in their work. So go ahead, Jamile, and then maybe Ben. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Dan, for the question. I was about to post here a link to a website for you that shows some of the results from BHP. I'm always challenging the mining companies to actually track the results of health and safety, productivity, and all these areas that you are questioning about once they start actually putting an intentional effort on gender equality and all other fronts, because most of the research shows us that there is a positive impact, not a negative impact. So when you ask, is it possible? There is a possibility of seeing some difficult results. One of the conversations we always have with the C-suite of these organizations is that you won't feel comfortable at the beginning because it's definitely a change of ways of doing things, and none of us are quite comfortable with change. So it might feel a little bit different than what we've done before, but essentially putting the effort. And the conversation with mining companies is this: we can't have this conversation 10 years from now. So if it takes the development of specific skills to actually address the gaps that we see with participation, let's put that effort now, right? Let's make connections with colleges and universities to ensure that we can create that workforce and develop that workforce that we need for the future. So maybe we don't have all those that we're talking about. So you see Nexa, you see Vale, you see a lot of these companies putting goals that are 2030, 2050 even. And just like BHP, which is the example I'm going to show you, it started with 2016, putting a goal for 2025, and you look at what they've done so far, and the impact is actually quite positive for most of the fronts they're measuring. So yes, I hear you, but I think there's a lot of work that companies need to do independent of this perspective that people are not ready right now.
I have a couple of thoughts on this. I mean, one is on the question of, are we sacrificing productivity? Absolutely not. I don't see that at all. And as we've had our early discussions in this, that has never come up. In fact, it's just the opposite, I think. This will, as Jamil said, make people uncomfortable. And that's important. It's time to be uncomfortable about these issues. But, I think if you hear from some of the leaders in the industry that have really embraced EDI in a meaningful way and made progress, I would say they would suggest that decisions are better. They're making better decisions. They're managing more effectively, having a diverse range of voices, experience, and views in the organization. So I think we could potentially even see productivity increase as a result of this as it takes hold. The issue of the availability of professionals is an issue. In fact, this morning we were just discussing this with our community of interest panel. And the balance for us as we start to integrate this into TSM really is around, how do you create a standard that can incentivize mining companies to embrace this, knowing that some of the targets that they meet, that they need to set for themselves are not entirely in their control to fill, because we have to work with the educational institutions to fill. So there really needs to be a very big focus on educational and training institutions. The other thing that kind of came up in our discussion just recently is, the fact that our industry is cyclical, and in the challenging times we tend to cut back workforces, and too often that is cutting back the young workers that are just coming into our industry, which is also where we can probably most easily address the diversity and inclusion issues. So I think moving forward, we have to keep that in mind. We have to figure out, how do we manage the cyclical nature of the industry and protect gains on diversity and inclusion that we make by bringing in a diversity of young people.
Thanks, Ben. Go ahead, Antoine.
Just to elaborate on what Ben just said, I think what we've seen we do measure D&I in various sectors, and I think we've seen some alarming trends that may not be surprising in the effects of COVID on diversity, and also the way it has affected working conditions for women in various places. So I think there's still some ground to go in terms of pay cuts or redundancies that we've seen happen in various companies that we've been able to measure through our tools in the past year. And we've done, probably think interviewed or got survey responses for about 200,000 workers on the COVID impact, and it's been quite striking to see the gender disaggregated effects. Probably not surprising to many of you, but just seeing the numbers is just reinforcing, I think, the message that other panelists have made today.
Thank you, Antoine. I have a couple of questions in my pocket here, but I was wondering if there's any of the panelists that might have a question for their co-panelist. All right, seeing none for now. This can be a question, I think, for many of you, but I'll send it to Jamile. So we're curious to see for strategies around supplier diversity specifically, but also within the just the supply chain, and what Nexa uses as an example. What can drive organizations to want to review their approaches and really invest in this? So we've had this question of, will this actually impact negatively production as we start and results? But what are you seeing companies that are pushing them to do this, and how can others kind of get on board with that as well, and how can that motivate that change? Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. I think we're seeing from this group here a lot of ways how companies get motivated to actually do the work. I think movements like Women in Mining Brazil really push the conversation, and when people start engaging, they're like, why haven't we done? We know peer pressure usually works, right? Tito Martins, the leader from Nexa, when he signed the agreement here at PDAC last year, I remember getting messages from other CEOs saying, what do I need to do, right? I saw that Tito signed, let me understand what you're doing or what Women in Mining Brazil is doing and what needs to be done. Based on the business that I run, I see the request and the serious request about developing a strategy around diversity, equity, and inclusion coming from companies once they see that market pressure coming towards them, or the challenges that they're having on attracting the best talent in the market, or questions coming from their clients. And we think, while mining companies, the clients are not really demanding that, investors are, right? So we see some of the mining companies being presented at the Bloomberg Gender Index, for example. We have the Responsible Mining Index that essentially ranks the companies based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And definitely we have seen companies taking action after seeing their name kind of at the back of the list. And on this example alone, I would say to all companies that are here watching, if you go into the Responsible Mining Index website, look at companies like Anglo that are usually on the front of the list for a lot of these actions around SDG number 5, for example, on gender. You can see a lot of the work that they've done, like Anglo will be in our panel tomorrow at Expo Brand, but I'm always impressed, like in Brazil, even from a domestic violence perspective, on coaching supervisors on how to essentially understand people who are coming with those challenges to the workplace and how to address it. So like there are companies that are being very innovative, I don't know if it's the right word here, but really being ahead of the game in terms of really caring about the employees. I think that's one of the words. Like when we put kindness and caring towards our employees, we're going to see huge benefits from a productivity, from a performance perspective. So I think the force behind companies actually making a serious commitment and investment are coming from all fronts, but definitely investors, the pressure from the market itself, and attraction of talent to ESG, right? It's kind of the big 3 letters there, but the concepts around social and governance that are coming quite strong from all fronts, and really pushing organizations to review their concepts and review how they're measuring and what needs to be done to maintain, to keep them responsible and sustainable. I think those are all things that are really pushing us forward.
Michelle, I don't know if I can add something here as well. As we have struggled as well with this theme, so it's a little bit hard to see when we see some companies that are really ahead, as Jamil mentioned, it's hard to see where do we begin. So start small. This is one thing that we learned. You start understanding a little bit better, you understand how's it working in your company, or how's it working in your field. then you accept the main pain points that you should work on it, and then you start giving some commitments. So to get to this phase where Tito signed the commitment with Women in Mining Brazil, it took a long time. It took a lot of conversation and to understand which strategy should we build to get to the results that we are targeting to. So if we can get to one tip, it start small and start getting to grow this team inside your company, and then you can grow to all of your entire supply chain, not only with suppliers, but also with the customers.
Maybe I could add too here that I think there's a real convergence in the industry at this time around this issue. And I don't think it's a question so much of getting companies on board. And we don't, as Jamila will know, we don't run into new protocols. In fact, her and I have had more than a few conversations over the last little while about the need to do this in TSM. And it took a while to get there, but when we brought this to our membership, we expected that there would be some that would be supportive and some that would be reluctant and have to bring it on. But we were very happily surprised that the entire MAC membership embraced this and said it's now is definitely the time to do this, if not a little late. And so there is significant support. And I think to Victoria's comment there, it's about setting milestones and a path that can be embraced both by companies that are just beginning their journey and also provide value to those that are well on their way to continue into that excellence and leadership space. So that's the challenge we have now that we're working on, to figure out how do we help provide a roadmap for companies that can be useful at any level, any point in the spectrum of their journey, from just beginning to quite advanced.
To build on that point, I think obviously our contribution to that is more like once the commitments have been made and the leadership is there, as I think Ben just echoed in Mac, is how can we help companies implement and measure, whether you're super mature or really at the beginning of the journey, it doesn't matter. The question is how the distance that you travel, and I think that's where we've been helping companies measure that. I think on that, I think it was mentioned of the SDGs. We've been working with another great Canadian, Bob Willard, who some of you may know, to develop a comprehensive assessment of the SDGs, including SDG 5. But the spillover between gender equality and all the other SDGs, as been mentioned before, is such that there's a lot of dividend in obviously investing in women by mining and by any sector, obviously. And I think a last point, maybe on the question of incentives, is how do you really reward the suppliers or better practices in that. I think some of the things we've seen in other in how our clients are using the data is that you can try to link it even a tiny bit to purchasing practices or to the financing conditions that you offer to your suppliers, for instance. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It just has, it's a really simple carrot that you can add once you have, the benchmarks that we've discussed previously. Then that can really steer a lot of improvement, and that's been applied to the environmental space. So I think it's something that can be further applied in the D&I sphere as well.
Thank you very much, Antoine, for those closing remarks. Now we've already come up to the end of our time for the panel. I want to thank all of our panelists who are here today. And it was really interesting to see the convergence, sorry, of work done sort of at the high levels of policy and with associations and within companies as well to implement these changes, not only for diversity, but also more overall responsible conduct. And the example of both Nexa and Ulula, so Nexa with work within the company to change their own policies and practices, and then Ulula that has technologies and capabilities for other companies to use to be able to bring these changes as well within their operations. So very interesting discussion. I hope that all of our participants drew a little bit from that. So to say, I hope that a little bit in Portuguese. Se alguns de vocês querem entrar em contato com qualquer de nossos panelistas, discutir a abordagem do Canadá para a conduta empresarial responsável, fiquem à vontade para entrar em contato comigo após o evento de hoje. Et donc, n'importe qui aurait des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter par la suite. Et je suis certaine que tous les panélistes seraient intéressés de discuter. So there we go. Thanks very much. I'll now hand over to CCBC, who will be doing their presentation. Or to France.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Antoine, Ben, Jamil, Michelle, Victoria. Thanks very much. You have indeed a very nice discussions about TSM principles and gender diversity in the mining sector. So thank you very much. Moving ahead, I would like to invite Paulo de Castro, Institutional Relations Director at the Brasil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, to present to us the Chamber Mining Committee activities. Paulo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Franz. Thank you, everyone. I'll be speaking in Portuguese. Muito boa tarde a todos. Eu vou compartilhar aqui a minha tela. Sim, imagino que vocês já estão vendo aqui a minha tela agora. Falar um pouco rapidamente sobre a Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Canadá. Nós estamos sediados em São Paulo e em Montreal. Temos uma atuação abrangente, nacional nos dois países. Hoje temos mais de 60 colaboradores que trabalham diariamente na Câmara, mesmo nesse período de pandemia. Oferecemos vários serviços relacionados a pesquisas e mapeamentos de mercado, dados estatísticos, agendamento de reuniões, exposições, feiras, eventos, apoio à internacionalização de empresas, rodadas de negócios, missões e o uso do espaço da CCBC. Temos também um centro de arbitragem e mediação, conhecido como CAM-CCBC, que foi o primeiro centro de arbitragem comercial estabelecido aqui no Brasil e hoje está entre os 8 maiores centros de arbitragem do mundo, resolvendo questões, inclusive no setor de mineração, questões societárias e disputas comerciais entre diferentes países, não se restringindo apenas a Brasil e Canadá. Então, o Centro de Arbitragem e a própria arbitragem é um instituto que oferece mais segurança jurídica para grandes contratos relacionados a grandes investimentos ou grandes negócios entre as empresas do Brasil ou do Brasil com outros países. Eu convido vocês a se informarem um pouco mais sobre isso ao fazer alguns contratos que necessitem de um cuidado especial e de mais segurança jurídica. Dentro da Câmara, nós formamos uma comissão, um capítulo mineral, uma comissão de mineração que envolve as empresas canadenses e brasileiras e o ecossistema de mineração aqui do Brasil todo. Muitas das nossas reuniões, inclusive, são em Belo Horizonte, às vezes fazemos alguns eventos em Brasília, outros em São Paulo. Hoje em dia, virtualmente, temos a possibilidade de contar com uma participação ainda mais ampla. A ideia desse capítulo mineral, dessa comissão de mineração, é justamente ser um fórum de discussão e de interação entre empresas brasileiras e canadenses, junto a representantes de governo e de agências governamentais e setoriais dos dois países. Através da comissão e das nossas atividades, a gente tem uma oportunidade de compartilhar boas práticas, tanto do Brasil como do Canadá nesse setor, identificar os desafios, buscar ações conjuntas de assuntos prioritários para o setor, identificar tendências do setor, oportunidades de negócios e promover network. A gente tem uma participação forte também em alguns eventos do do setor, como o Exposibran, o PDAC. Nas atividades da nossa comissão, a gente tem envolvido vários participantes do setor e temos falado de temas relevantes para o setor, como discutindo questões como licenciamento ambiental, os PLs, projetos de leis regulatórios relacionados à atividade de mineração, as licenças sociais para operar, as relações com as comunidades locais, presença também empregabilidade feminina, trabalhando muito próximo a alguns movimentos como o Women in Mining, discutindo temas como esses que a gente estava falando agora há pouco, até na sessão de hoje, nesse seminário, trazendo mais diversidade para o setor mineral. Falamos e temos falado também temas ligados à segurança, como gestão de barragens, transparência, adequação de estruturas, de acordo com a Política Nacional de Barragens e Gestão Fundiária. Outros temas ligados também a tecnologias que possam ser aplicadas à mineração, muita coisa ligada também a Clean Tech for Mining, e também temas ligados à melhoria da imagem da mineração aqui no Brasil e até mesmo no Canadá. Aqui até um slide com algumas fotos relacionadas a algumas das atividades que a gente faz no PDAC. Queria chamar a atenção aqui principalmente para os brasileiros, que nos meses de março, todo ano, um dos principais encontros de mineração do mundo acontece em Toronto, no Canadá, se chama PDAC, e junto com outros parceiros, a Câmara de Comércio Brasil-Canadá e a nossa comissão organizam uma missão brasileira para o PDAC, onde temos oportunidade de nos reunir, interagir com outras empresas e instituições do setor, e organizamos uma agenda recheada, não só aproveitando a participação no evento, no PDAC, mas uma agenda paralela com diferentes reuniões, onde procuramos apoiar contatos para que possam gerar investimentos ou parcerias entre Brasil e Canadá. E temos vários parceiros estratégicos que têm contribuído com os eventos que a nossa comissão organiza durante esse período recente. Esses aqui são só alguns dos parceiros que estiveram conosco nos eventos durante esse período de pandemia, ano passado e esse ano. Então, com isso, eu gostaria de deixar aqui uma mensagem relacionada a esse capítulo mineral, que procura ser o grande ponto de encontro do ecossistema Brasil-Canadá do setor de mineração. Gostaria de convidar todas aquelas empresas que sejam mineradoras, prestadores de serviço para mineração, prospecção, tecnologias relacionadas à mineração, regulatórios, consultorias, para que entrem em contato conosco, para que se juntem a esse nosso grupo, para que a gente possa enriquecer as nossas discussões e ampliar as oportunidades de negócios para todo mundo. Muito obrigado.
Paulo, muito obrigado pela sua apresentação. Ela foi bastante informativa. Te agradeço. So, I would like to invite to the stage my colleagues Monica McDonald and Luis Antonini, who will introduce to us the Canadian clean tech expertise in Canada, as well as in the province of Quebec. So, Monica, Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you. Luis, we are having some problems with Monica. If you don't mind, could you start your presentation first?
Yes, for sure. Not a problem.
Hi, sorry, I just
So
joined.
Monica's there. Good.
Okay.
Go ahead, Monica. Go ahead.
We're
good
running
now. Ahead of schedule.
Yes, we are 8 minutes ahead of schedule.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
Sorry for the confusion, and I'm happy to join. We have translation, right?
Yes, we do have translation. For those willing to have the Portuguese version, just click in the interpretation button in the bottom of your screen.
Okay. No, sorry, I'm going to do my presentation in Portuguese, so we'll just continue from here. Muito obrigada. Boa tarde a todos. Obrigada pelo interesse no evento de hoje. Canada at the forefront of sustainable mining. Seguindo com a agenda de hoje, tenho o prazer de moderar o último painel do nosso evento, painel 3, a revolução das tecnologias limpas, capacidades canadenses e oportunidades. Eu sou Mônica Mictana Fortino, gerente comercial do setor de tecnologias limpas pelo governo do Canadá no Brasil, baseada no Consulado Geral do Canadá em São Paulo. Primeiramente, eu quero agradecer ao meu colega Franz Brandenberger, gerente comercial do setor de mineração pelo governo do Canadá no Brasil, pela colaboração em organizar esse evento sobre mineração sustentável e esse painel. Agradeço o Franz também pela colaboração em organizar a missão comercial virtual de tecnologias limpas para mineração, com a rodada de negócios começando amanhã. Quero agradecer à CCBC pela colaboração e apoio do evento de hoje e também pelo esforço imenso de agendar as reuniões da rodada de negócios para os próximos 2 dias entre a delegação canadense e as empresas brasileiras de mineração. E, finalmente, quero agradecer a participação da província de Quebec, representada pelo Luiz Antonini, no painel de hoje, que apresentará sobre a expertise do Quebec em tecnologias limpas para mineração. Quebec também está participando na missão comercial e trouxe algumas empresas bem fortes e interessantes para a delegação. Eu vou compartilhar minha tela para a minha apresentação. Ok. Então, vou começar a falar sobre o papel do governo canadense no Brasil em apoiar as empresas canadenses a entrar no mercado brasileiro. E só um parênteses, vocês vão perceber que não sou brasileira e talvez estão pensando que eu sou canadense, mas eu sou americana, moro em São Paulo há 6 anos e trabalho pelo governo canadense no Brasil faz 2 anos e meio, só para esclarecer qualquer dúvida sobre o meu sotaque. Então, eu e o Franz trabalhamos pelo Trade Commissioner Service, o Serviço de Promoção Comercial, que é uma rede de especialistas em comércio internacional dentro do Departamento de Global Affairs Canada, que representa o governo federal canadense fora do Canadá e promove seus interesses comerciais. No Brasil, está presente em várias regiões, a equipe comercial é espalhada entre a embaixada, que fica em Brasília, os consulados gerais em São Paulo e no Rio, e os escritórios comerciais em Porto Alegre, Belo Horizonte e Recife. O Serviço de Promoção Comercial do Canadá providencia 4 serviços chaves para as empresas canadenses: preparação para os mercados internacionais, avaliação do potencial no mercado, identificação de contatos qualificados, e resolução de problemas comerciais. A gente trabalha junto com a CCBC e seus membros, Quebec e todas as províncias para providenciar esses serviços. Muitos dos membros da CCBC e contatos do Quebec são os contatos locais que as empresas canadenses buscam. São potenciais parceiros para representar e distribuir a sua marca no Brasil, ou são potenciais usuários ou consumidores dos produtos e serviços, ou são fornecedores de serviços que ajudam as empresas a se estabelecer suas operações aqui. Uma das atividades que fazemos como o Serviço de Promoção Comercial do Canadá é organizar missões comerciais, em que as empresas canadenses podem conhecer melhor o mercado e interagir diretamente com potenciais parceiros no Brasil. Durante a pandemia, estamos realizando missões virtuais. Para a missão virtual de tecnologias limpas para a mineração brasileira, que está acontecendo agora, oferecemos essas atividades para as empresas canadenses. Organizamos a missão em colaboração com a província de Quebec. E eu espero que muitos de vocês estão participando nessa rodada de negócios com as empresas canadenses nos próximos dias. E a razão que estamos focando nas tecnologias limpas para mineração é porque o Canadá é muito forte em mineração, como é bem conhecido no Brasil. E o Canadá também é líder na área de tecnologias limpas. E o setor de mineração tem bastante oportunidade para a aplicação de soluções ambientais. A gente considera qualquer tecnologia que tenha um benefício ao meio ambiente uma tecnologia limpa. O Canadá tem expertise em soluções limpas nas seguintes áreas que são relevantes ao Brasil. São monitoramento de barragens minerais, mineração a seco, tratamento de particulados e poeira no ar, economia de combustível para equipamentos móveis, tratamento e reuso da água, e eu quero destacar aqui que o Canadá é líder mundial no desenvolvimento de tecnologias para tratamento de água e efluente. Tem também fontes alternativas de energia e tratamento de rejeitos e resíduos. As soluções limpas canadenses para mineração são muito diversificadas, então a gente procura sempre entender as demandas das empresas brasileiras para buscar as soluções mais apropriadas para atender o mercado. E é isso que fizemos na missão em paralelo à Exposibran. Eu queria aproveitar dessa oportunidade para apresentar as empresas da nossa delegação canadense na missão comercial como exemplos da revolução das tecnologias limpas para o setor de mineração. Vou dar uma breve descrição das empresas e depois temos um playlist de vídeos de cada empresa para deixar elas falar por si. No primeiro agrupamento, temos tecnologias para o monitoramento, tratamento e reuso de água. Temos a empresa 2S Water, da província de Alberta, que oferece um sensor que detecta e quantifica metais na água em tempo real, em um processo totalmente automatizado. Clear Flow Group, também de Alberta, oferece uma solução de floculantes ecológicos em gel para a redução de sólidos suspensos em metais em água e são facilmente implantados. Darcom Innovations, do Quebec, permite a reutilização da água negra em sistemas de saneamento portáteis, sem usar energia, com um sistema de filtragem 100% natural e sem odor. Temos a IC Controls de Ontário, que oferece sensores e analisadores para pH, ORP, condutividade, TDS, cloro e oxigênio dissolvido para minimizar corrosão, incrustação e garantir a qualidade da água. Temos duas empresas com soluções para a economia de combustível, e são Cascadia Scientific, da Colômbia Britânica, que oferece uma plataforma para otimização de equipamentos de alta potencial. Só um momento. Desculpa. A Cascadia Scientific, da Colômbia Britânica, oferece uma plataforma para otimização de equipamentos de alta potencial a diesel, com sensores medindo o consumo de combustível com alta precisão. A H2 Tech, de Ontário, fornece tecnologia que introduz gás, hidrogênio e oxigênio na entrada de ar para reduzir as emissões do motor diesel e melhorar a economia de combustível. Também relacionada à